So let's get into part three, Trevor, and this will be a little bit quicker of a shorter segment. What are some things that Notre Dame needs to do to get rolling on offense and defense moving forward? And we'll start with the offense, and then we'll finish things up with the defense. And so part one, when you look at the offense, we talked about you got to get the quarterback going. Okay, that's a given, but that's not the only answer. Or there are some answers that are good for other things that will then also help the quarterback. One thing is I get as a coach, like fans only saw A&M in Northern Illinois, and they just think, well, that must be what was happening every single day. And I've tried to explain to people, that's not how football works. You have some guys that are really good in practice. They're not good on Saturdays. You've had some guys that aren't very good in practice, and they're great on Saturdays. I've coached players like that. Best receiver I ever coached was a mediocre practice player physically. Mentally, he was locked in, but physically, he was a super tightly wound athlete. Couldn't get as loose on practice days as he would on game day. When for whatever it was, the adrenaline of game day would loosen him up a lot more than it was on practice. I had another kid who just couldn't mentally lock in the same way he did on. I mean, he'd legitimately 50-50 in practice on contested throws. And then you'd get into game day and it was like 90-10. If it got thrown up to him, he was coming down with it. I mean, that's just the way that it is. So they clearly saw something in this football team in practice and said, hey, let's keep rolling it. Okay. I mean, you don't win the jersey scrimmage playing the way that you did against Northern Illinois, right? You just don't. And I saw things in practice that were way better than what we saw against Northern Illinois. But you now have two games of evidence of, okay, here's where we're not as good as we thought, but here's some guys that are really playing well. And the first thing that they need to do offensively is lean more into the proven playmakers. If you go into the next game and Jeremiah Love has less than 15 touches and Jadarian Price has less than 10, you did it wrong, with one exception. Jeremiah Love averaged 11 yards a carry. Jadarian had 5 carries for 112 yards. You get what I'm saying? Like, okay, I couldn't get him 15 touches. He kept freaking breaking them for long run. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? But, like, that's not what happened on Saturday against Northern Illinois. If those two kids aren't combining, I'll just say this. If those two kids aren't combining for a minimum of 20, 25 touches, pass game, run game, all capacities, then you're not doing something right. And so that requires not that you just give them more inside zone handoffs, but mix it up a little bit. Like I'd be looking at Northern, like all coaches do this. I watched this team do this against our defense, and I freaking love it for us because we've got – so like you think about a jet sweep action where you've got Jeremiah Love running a jet sweep. You give him that a couple times, and the next thing you know, you got Jadarian Price running a seam route or a wheel route like Northern Illinois did, and you think they're going to be running with Jadarian Price? Or here's the thought. You run Jadarian Price on a wheel route first. If it hits, now all of a sudden they're running with him as Jeremiah is running around outside of them. Mm-hmm. Do some things like that. Get more creative. Do more things that are faster. Everything that they're doing right now is slow. It's all slow, right? Do more high-low stuff. Do more, and I know Denbrock has it in his offense. Everything they're doing right now is slow. And a big reason why is on top of doing more to get your guys the ball, you need to also – simplification doesn't just help with Riley Leonard. I'm going to repeat again. 9 starters that are freshman or sophomore eligibility, and they're all in a new offense. Your 2 veterans, Riley Leonard and Bo Collins, are really in their first semester of really getting action with this football team. They're all new to this. Chris Mitchell is clearly not comfortable with what you're doing. Jaden Greathouse is not as comfortable he was in the spring. He needs to figure some stuff out. But here's the thing. You've got to do more to you've got to be intentional about getting your playmakers of football. What we're seeing right now is they're just running concepts, and then you got to read it and get – that's fine. Got to have that. There needs to be a little bit more to say, hey, Riley, Steve, Kenny, CJ, whoever the heck is at quarterback, Anthony Rizak, whoever's a quarterback, on this play, we're throwing the ball to number 10. The only way we don't is if they line up like this and then we're going here. But this play is going to 10. And people say, well, you can't do that. Yes, you can. Coaches do that all the freaking time. I watched John Elway and Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak do that in a Super Bowl. We're designing his whole play to throw a post route to Rod Smith because of how Eugene Robinson is coming down and treating this certain bootleg action. Do you ever seen that on NFL films? They're spending a whole series designing one because they knew on that play, based on we know that when we line up like this and run this action, this guy's doing this. And there's one read. That's in the NFL. You don't think you can do that in college? You can't manipulate a defender in college? Of course you can. And Mike Denbrock did a lot of that at LSU. He needs to show more faith in his players, in my opinion, now at Notre Dame and say, hey, Chris Mitchell, we're not going to be the team we need to be if you don't get going.
Yep.
Right? Jaden Greathouse, we're not going to be the team that we need to be if you're catching 3 balls and averaging less than 10 yards a catch. Right? We got to do more to get you to rock. And, Bo Collins, same thing, a little bit more to him. You've got the talented players. You've got to do more to get them to rock. You talk about why did Jaden Greathouse drop that ball? I don't know why. Maybe because he's not getting the ball a lot. He put a lot of pressure on himself. I got a chance to go make a big play. When if he's kind of a more of a normal part of the offense like he was in the spring, maybe he could have just dropped it. That happens, though. I've seen Will Fuller drop balls. You don't go away from them. It happens. So you've got these talented players. You've got to do more to design things to get them the ball because simplification works for everybody. And you know who else simplification works for, Trevor? The offensive line.
Yep.
So be more simplified with your run stuff between the tackles. Here's the thing about a jet sweep. Your offensive line doesn't have to do a whole lot. They get beat, it doesn't matter. You're running outside of them. You know what I mean? There's some things that you can do that kind of take the pressure off of them that they don't have to dominate every single play.
Sure.
And so I think there's things like that. Simplify your scheme, get more complex with your movement. That's what I would say, because movement is a lot easier to learn and adjust. Hey, we're going to do this a million different ways, but it's still zone. It's still smash. It's still this. We're just going to run smash with motion. We're going to run a long motion. We're going to run smash with a short motion. We're going to smash with a stack. We're going to post snap switch it. We're going to do all types. We're going to do one with our running back. We're going to go a 3-by-1 and run the corner route from our running back and try to open that up with a backside over route. But just get creative with it, but it's still smash. For your quarterback, it's still smash. And those are things that I would like to see more of, Trevor, is push the tempo, be more creative pre-snap, get your guys the ball, but overall, schematically, do more pre-snap and with your looks and less with the volume of scheme until your kids get comfortable. And then once the light goes on, then you can start adding more and more and more to it, because this isn't a recipe to go beat Georgia, guys. This is not the recipe to go beat USC at the end of the year. It's not the recipe to beat Texas or Alabama. It's a freaking recipe to beat Purdue that then will serve benefits to getting your guys going so you can then be in position to beat Louisville and those type of teams. And so to me, offensively, that's a big part of what I want to see from this team on Saturday.
I would love to see Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price on the field at the same time. We heard a lot about that in the offseason. And
unfortunately, it was us saying they should do it.
Sure.
Not them doing it.
Sure. But if I'm Mike Denbrock, to build off of what you were saying pre-snap, one of the biggest things that you can do, even if I don't know why Notre Dame goes away from motion, against Northern Illinois like they did. Yes, be active pre-snap. Some of that goes into the personnel that's on the field. And Notre Dame has put themselves in a position where, to our point earlier, they have 3 bona fide playmakers, 4, 24, and 5, right? So if I'm somebody on defense and I'm looking at that, you as an offensive coordinator need to put the defense in a position where they have to be prepared to game plan for multiple people, right? It's no mystery that when you trot, and I hope he starts to break open. I hope he starts to build on the season. But when I'm trotting Chris Mitchell out there, who has maybe 5 or 6 targets through 2 games, if I'm looking at as a defensive player, That's not a threat right now. It's not. Notre Dame knows how fast Chris Mitchell is, and Notre Dame knows how explosive he is. The other teams haven't seen that, but they've seen how explosive Bo Collins can be in one-on-one jump ball situations. They've seen how explosive Jeremiah Love is. They've seen how explosive Jadarian Price is. If I'm Mike Denbrock, I'm looking at stuff of putting Jeremiah Love in the slot, which they did against Texas A&M. Had him run a slot fade. I'm lining him up. You want to send somebody in motion, send Jeremiah Love in motion. Jadarian Price is in the backfield. Just make it to where they pre-snap, the defense have to be ready and prepared to game plan for multiple different outcomes. Yeah. This could be one of those little touch passes to Jeremiah Love. This could be a zone read. It could be anything.
Let me give you an example from my own coaching career that talks about, like, you gotta have some creativity.
Yep.
So we're playing my alma mater, Salisbury, in the playoff in 2004, and they're undefeated. It's at their place. This is obviously a big game for me because it's my alma mater. So we're playing them, and I saw that, hey, they go twins over. Corners on twins over. So if we go twins, they go corners over, on twins. So if we went out on the field and went 21 personnel, 2 backs, we had a fullback, tight end, and 2 receivers, and we go twins, so the 2 receivers are away from the tight end, they will put both corners over. Their safety, I played with the kid. He's a good hitter, can't run. So what we did is this. We lined up in 21 personnel and went twins. We put our running back in the slot. We put our fastest receiver, George Jones, in at running back, motioned him out, safety went out, touchdown. So then you know what we did? You know what they're going to do next, right? They're going to cheat that safety over even more. So we did the same thing. We're trying to put this game away. We motioned George out, ran double post backside, hit our backside post because we knew they were going to exaggerate, take that other safety over, come down, roll that safety over, and the backside post is going to open up, right? Like, you got to be thinking. We've never done that in at all during the season. But I said, look, when they do this, we know that we can then get a matchup. So, like, okay, twins over, Jeremiah Love in the slot. Maybe you put Jaden Greathouse in the backfield or Chris Mitchell in the backfield to try to get some. If you get that type, that's only if it works. Twins, right?
Sure.
This is an example, and you motion him out. Now he's matched up against a linebacker. Like, he did that a little bit against A&M. Like against A&M, they did that with the slot fade where they motioned him out in the slot and ran the slot fade in the end zone. But then we don't see it at all against Northern Illinois. And that goes back to where I really think the lack of preparation, the lack of that last day of practice where you're doing a lot of your situational stuff, a lot of 7-on-7, I think really hurt this football team.
Yeah.
Because we saw less creativity against Northern Illinois than we did against Texas A&M. To a degree, it's like, okay, yeah, because they're better. But, like, you've got to do more to get those guys to football. There's no excuse for Jadarian Price only have 3 touches on Saturday. Mm-hmm. And Jeremiah Love only touched the ball once. And I heard all Marcus Freeman's answers. They're bad answers. And I think he's saying it to protect his coaches. I don't think he actually believes that.
Agreed.
But the point is, you've got these guys doing certain things. Let them do it. Use them. Do more creative things to get them in good matchups. And I just want to see a little bit more of that. When your offense is struggling, you have to even be more so into that type of thing to get them going. And that's my point is like, and sometimes it's not something that you're going to use every week. It's game specific stuff, but you have to look at the point of the example I shared, Trevor, was it's not that, hey, if you guys do this in the game, it's going to work. No, this is from 2004. It's 20 years ago. The point is the principle behind it. We knew that if we lined up in this personnel and this alignment, they weren't going to be smart enough to recognize that's the running back. They're going to, now they might if it was Audric Estime, but Roland Hilliard looked like our slot receiver. I mean, you know what I mean? Jeremiah Love kind of looks like their slot receivers.
Sure.
So you do that first time you do it, they may not, they're just going to see twins. So you kind of go up and you just, and they, but then if they don't, and they keep their corner over, now you've got Jeremiah Love matched up against the safety or linebacker to the other side. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, like, those are things that I would look at and say, you got to have some of that creativity. And if you're not going to do that, then I don't know what to tell you. You've got all these weapons. You've got, well, they're not Malik Neighbors. They don't have to be. Antonio Brown isn't. Trayvon Rudolph isn't. And that worked pretty freaking well against a really good defense on Saturday.
Yeah, I would say so.
Do that. Be willing to, the offense needs to be, how can I do things to make sure that we're getting our best players the football in space? And you can still run your concepts, but there needs to be, it's not an either or, it's both. You got to do both. And that's what I want to see from the offense. And I think that would help the offensive line out as well, because you can somewhat, with the movement, some rollouts, some bootlegs, things like that. Bootlegs are going to give you more protection bodies. Rollouts are going to, like, hey, it's hard for an offensive line to screw up a bootleg. Mm-hmm. It really is, especially a naked. It's hard for an offensive line to screw up a sprint out. It really is. They can, but that's one less pass pro than Anthony Knapp has to worry about going against a 290-pound defensive end. You know what I mean? So it's just, you got a young group. Simplify. Let them get some confidence, then build on it. But up the tempo. Go faster. That's also my final key, Trevor. That's my rant. Let's have at it. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I want to see the tempo increased. They did it on the first drive of the game, and what do you know? They scored on the first drive of the game. It's fantastic. Then the rest of the game, they went away from it. I want to see some sort of offensive rhythm in play calling from Mike Denbrock. Felt like against the in the Northern Illinois game, it was kind of just, let's just run this play and see if it works, instead of, I'm setting this play up now to bring it back later. And Mike Denbrock is a genius play caller. I've watched games of his before in the past where it is that chess match of, I'm setting this up now, or I have this personnel grouping out now because I'm going to refer back to it later when we need something because we have a favorable look, right? I want to see that. I want to see a simplified game plan across the board for everybody, not just for the quarterback. Simplified for the offensive line, right? And just from an overall schematic standpoint, get the ball in the hands of your playmakers in favorable situations. Don't just run inside zone, and then just wait for Jeremiah Love to break it, because odds are he will at some point. That's what he showed us the first two games. But that's not going to get anybody. Right, 100%.
Right.
But that's just not going to get anybody in a rhythm. One of the next things I want to see is getting the tight ends more involved. And I know that's going to be kind of shades of 22 and 23, but I think the difference is in 22 and in 23, like, you kind of had to do that, get your tight ends involved to move the ball. With this offense and the personnel that you do have at wide receiver, with Bo Collins, with Chris Mitchell, with Jaden Greathouse, with Jaden Thomas, who was apparently absent on Saturday, schematically, but the difference is this year Notre Dame doesn't have to go to their tight ends for the only source of offense like they had to in 22 with Michael Mayer.
Shouldn't have to. That kind of did rear its ugly head on Saturday. It's like every third down, they're like, let's throw it to Mitchell Evans.
Yep.
And it worked because Mitchell's really good, but teams are going to figure that out a little bit. Sorry.
Totally. No, you're good. So I want it to be more complementary. That's what I want to see, because you have the ability to make it that way, right? With the personnel groupings that you have and you can put on the field. So in a nutshell, the things that I'm looking for: get the ball in the hands of your playmakers, simplify the offense, and be creative pre-snap with the personnel groupings that you put out, with the pre-snap motion that you have, because the pre-snap motion meshed with Notre Dame's defense and what Northern Illinois was able to do. And Notre Dame's defense is one of the best in the country. Still believe that after what happened against Northern Illinois, because at the end of the day, the defense didn't play great, but they still gave the offense opportunities to win, just not when it mattered the most at the end of the game on the final drive. But those are going to be the three big things that I'm looking for on offense to your point, jumpstart where we're, what we have been talking about, what Notre Dame needs to do for the rest of the season.
Let's talk defense, Trevor. And a lot of the defensive stuff, it's just be more focused, tackle better, limit the mental mistakes, a lot of that stuff. But there is one thing that has gone on in both games that needs to get addressed. They have to figure out their run defensive plan. I understand Al Golden's philosophy is, I don't really care about being a top 10 run defense. And what he means by that is not, I don't care if people run the ball on it. That's not what he's talking about. What he's saying is, we're not going to care about holding teams to 70 yards rushing and being the number one rush defense. We're going to be good against the run, but we're going to be a team that's prepared to be multiple and Because if you're so focused on that, then you run the risk of, if you don't have elite athletes, you could get thrown on. And Notre Dame does have elite athletes, but I'm okay with it. But you also can't do what we've seen the first 2 games, where A&M kind of wrote the book on Notre Dame in the second half, and Illinois said, "Thank you, we will use that," and went out and did the same exact thing. And the answers that we got is, well, they were just running this stretch play. Like, I'm sorry, how are you not? You can't defend a stretch play. Purdue is going to go right to that same game plan. They've got a mobile quarterback, but they ran for over 240 yards in their first game, and that is a team that they're going to watch. Purdue's got some decent receivers. They are not going to watch this game and say, "Hey, let's go try to throw the ball all over Notre Dame's defense." No, they're going to take Devin Mockabee, Elijah Jackson, who had 3 carries for 83 yards, Reggie Love, and they're going to run those guys. And they're going to run those guys a lot. Hudson Card's going to have some bootlegs and they're going to watch that game plan and say, we're going to make Notre Dame learn how to defend that stuff, because they didn't do it again. They didn't adjust to it against A&M. They didn't adjust to it against Northern Illinois. Part of it's personnel. If you're going to have Kurt Hinish in the game, you need to let him be a penetrator, not a space eater.
Yep.
You need your defensive tackles overall to play better.
Yep.
Coach Freeman said that they are playing fine. That is, I hope, coach speak, because they're definitely not. Your defensive ends have to be a lot more consistent setting the edge, certainly. And you need to have more aggressive run stunts against those. So if they want to try to get a stretch, then here's what you do. Hey, Drake, if you see them running stretch to you, you're a B-gap guy. You run as hard as you can into that guard and blow that joker up, because you're not necessarily the ball stopper here. You're the B-gap defender on this stunt. You run into that guard as hard as you can, hopefully knock him back into the track. Right? I mean, like, that's what disruption does. And I want to see more of that from them. They have to be more aggressive against, like, to me, it's like, because you have the elite secondary you need to be able to commit more resources to the run until your front shows that they can handle it. Otherwise, these teams are going to keep playing ball control. They're going to keep playing keep away from your offense. They're going to continue to control the momentum and time of the game, and they're just going to keep running at you. Northern Illinois did such a great job of staying on schedule, Trevor, of just constantly being in 3rd and short, 2nd and short, to where they could just, and I said it again, they helped Notre Dame out by throwing on 4th down. I don't know why they did that. I would have lined up. I said this, I'd have gone 5 tight ends, and my running back in that 5 tight end, one running back wildcat they were doing, and just run it right at you and made you stop us.
Yeah.
And they decided to throw, and it's like Notre Dame's like, cool, this is what we want you to do. But Notre Dame also has to do some more things to try to force teams out of running the ball with numbers, and they didn't do that on Saturday. So they're going to have to find some answers in a hurry with their run defense, because they got manhandled by Northern Illinois. Purdue's not quite as big as Northern Illinois, but some teams on the schedule down the road are. You need to find some answers and find them fast. That's really the only thing. The defense didn't play great on Saturday, but they weren't locked in. The run game struggling for 2 straight games is a bit of a concern for me, to be honest with you. That's my only really big structural concern right now. What say you?
I'm in the same boat as you. I need to see more penetration on the defensive line. In the Texas A&M game, the 2 ends, more specifically Jordan Botelho, did a really good job of coming flat down the line and blowing up some of those stretch plays or inside zone plays, which I would like to see more of. But I would just like to see Al Golden and Al Washington really let the D-line loose, instead of, trying to hold leverage and waiting for the linebackers to scrape over and gap fill, which you still have to do regardless. You'll have your running assignments 100%. But this is a younger linebacker group, more athletic, bigger than what you were at last year. But if there's one thing that J.D. Bertrand last year was really good at doing, is it was going and filling those run assignments. And Bowen has had his moments where he's been there. You had that viral play of what he did on that counter play against Texas A&M. That's fantastic.
He said others like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but
moments.
yep, again, it's the biggest theme, which I know we'll talk about throughout the week, is just that overall consistency. It's not good enough anymore to do it some of the time.
Trevor, that's why I feel like they need to be a little bit more aggressive with their stunts.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we saw on Saturday was, and this was true of Drake, it was true of Kingston, it was true of Snead, it was true of Alsbury, is there was way too much passiveness with the linebackers. And that's why I say, like, you need to get your safety downs down a little bit so you can be more aggressive, crashing your linebackers and run stunts. Because you need, with the way that, and I don't know that Purdue is going to do this as much. I would if I was their OC, but they didn't show me as much of the craziness that Northern Illinois did. I'm going to have to go rewatch that game. I didn't study it and break it down yet like I did Northern Illinois last week. I will later tonight. But that stuff really messed with the linebackers. But other teams are going to see that and say, hey, that really messed with the linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have to be prepared to kind of, launch them a little bit and allow them to be more aggressive. Maybe you do some more things where you slant the D-line inside and let Drake crash off the edge a little. I mean, there's different things you can do, but the reality is you're going to have to find answers. And just doing better at what you're doing is not a good plan, because I think the plan is structurally flawed.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
I agree. It almost feels like they're playing with the same linebacking core that they had in the previous year, which you don't. And there are some pros to that, and there are some cons to that. And we're seeing the cons in the run game right now, unfortunately. So for me, I think it's getting creative with the D line, and I'll take it a step further into the personnel groupings that you're putting out onto the field as well, and what you're asking that personnel grouping to do. Donnie Heinisch is a really good defensive tackle. Don't get it twisted. But you can't ask him to do the things that you would ask a Gabriel Rubio to do. They're just two different style of players. That's not a knock on Gabe Rubio, and that's not a knock on Donnie Heinisch. They're both fantastic in their own respective ways. And so you need to play to those strengths. You can't ask Donovan Heinisch to leverage a 330-pound center. You just can't. Like, that is setting your players up for failure. And we saw it. We saw it watching the game on Saturday, right? So I would like to see a little bit more creativity with the personnel groupings. Heard nothing but great things about Armel Mukum. Didn't see him that much on Saturday. And improvement from RJ Oben.
That needs to change, by the way. Armel Mukum not playing as much, or not playing, that needs to change in a hurry.
Yep. I heard nothing but great things about him in practice. It sounds like, I mean, from the practices that you've seen,
and he just gives you beef.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point. He just gives you beef. And now, even if you're going to ask Donovan to do that, take 10, 12 snaps off Donovan's shoulders, and maybe he'll be a little bit quicker in the fourth quarter.
Sure.
Than he was on Saturday. I mean, so.
Yeah, I agree. But the biggest thing that I'm going to be watching for on Saturday is the play of the defensive line. Northern Illinois did a really good job of taking away the strength of the Notre Dame defense, which was the passing game, because they didn't need it. And then when they did need it, Notre Dame was so honed in on the run that Ben Morrison's getting beat by MAC receivers on not routes that are crazy. He wasn't getting burned on double moves. It's just he was flat-footed. He was waiting on the run. You run play action, you boot out Northern Illinois' quarterback, and Ben Morrison's a step behind on an over route. It's nothing crazy.
No.
They didn't do anything mind-blowing, but to me, that's where it starts. And I know Al Golden's philosophy is, well, we're not going to be known for holding teams to 70 yards a game for rushing. It's like, well, that's not what we're asking.
Right.
That's not what the team needs, because you were a great defense last year when you were like 32nd in overall rushing yards per game.
Gave up 119 a game last year.
Yeah, and that's fine, but you had more favorable matchups. In within those stats, you were able to win those matchups, which you haven't been able to do in the second quarter of the Texas A&M game, and really for the bulk of the Northern Illinois game. So D-line play is going to be huge for me. And then to your point, the only other keys that I have, man, are just the come out and play with intensity.
Yeah, everywhere.
Yes.
Everywhere. Not just a couple people in the chat. Oh, Xavier Watts played his heart out. Yeah, he did. But it can't just be Jaden Osbury played his butt off. It can't just be a couple. I thought Christian Gray was a lot better this week than he was the week before. Can't just be a couple guys, though. It's got to be as a unit. This is a unit that needs to take a lot more. I think there was a lot of reading of the press clippings.
Yep.
From some of this group.
Agreed.
And as we said last week, Northern Illinois was not afraid of you. They were not going to be afraid of you, and neither is Purdue. And I'm talking about the defense now as well, Trevor.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's you need to get back to the point where you need to give teams a reason to fear you. And yes, like there's always going to be that. I remember the Northern Illinois coach came out and said, well, they put their pants on the same way that we do, which is a great mentality to have when you're the 4-touchdown underdog going into, a hostile environment to go play. That's the right mindset that you need to have. But what Notre Dame on defense specifically has the opportunity to do this week is remind people, it's like, hey, this is why you should not want to play our defense in any capacity, whether it's in the run game, definitely still not in the pass game. But I don't really think, especially what's happened the last 6 quarters of gameplay for Notre Dame's defense, is I don't think they're going to ask Hudson Card to line up and throw it 37 times. I wouldn't, not if I was Purdue's offensive coordinator. So it's a lot of intensity on the front and the front seven on defense for me. It's not being afraid to go in and make a mistake, a controlled mistake. I'm not talking about a targeting penalty or a face mask, but don't wait to absorb tackles. Like attack at the point of attack. Like be okay with Notre Dame's defense is fast enough to where if you slow up a running back and swarm the football, but you go in at 110 miles an hour and you get a hand on somebody, I'd be willing to take that than watch Ontario Brown again not get touched for the first 4 yards of his carry until somebody is waiting to give him a bear hug. That's what I would like to see. So D-line play, just overall playing aggressive between the whistles. That's really my 2 things. Not outside of the D-line, nothing crazy schematic. More stunts on the D-line for sure. But it's where I'm at.
So, Trevor, before we wrap up, we do have some super chats I want to get to here real quick. We have a super chat from AST12321. Thank you very much for your super chat. I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with Notre Dame football. I love it so much, and it keeps hurting me, but I keep giving it more chances. That is a great way of putting it, Trevor. And I think we kind of all feel that way at times. It's like, I want to quit you, but I can't. Just the love is too deep.
Yeah. It's like trying to get rid of your first car.
Yeah, I had a hard time with that.
Yeah, me
Very
too.
hard time with that.
Yeah.
I had a car for over 20 years.
Let's go.
Yeah. Michael S. with a super chat. Thank you, Michael. Feel if Notre Dame doesn't come out and dominate with multiple scores, they become frustrated and lose any momentum as game goes on. Your view? No, I don't think it's that. I think that is a byproduct of them just not being locked in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this team, because the other thing is, like last year, that was not the case. They actually struggled a lot early at times last year and then pulled teams away. I think they just need to come out in more of a rhythm and do more things to kind of get rolling, and not just for the first series, but moving forward. So I definitely think that they lose momentum, but I don't think it's because they don't come out and dominate so they get frustrated. I don't think that's necessarily it. Iden Benami with a super chat. One thing that's giving me hope is it took Dabo 6 years to win his first championship. Also, after seeing and hearing about this analytics guy, very upsetting. Well, Dabo won because he made the move to go to a really talented freshman quarterback back in 2014 and prepare for the future. And, and that guy took his lumps as a freshman, got knocked out for a couple games, came back. In 2015, led his team as a true sophomore, led his team to a national championship berth, and they lost. And then the next year he went out and led them to a national championship. So, that worked out pretty well for Dabo. And the team they beat in 2016 started a true freshman quarterback who led them to the national championship game. So
Sure did.
if it's your best guy, it's your best guy. Michael S. also says, why is A&M not the anomaly? Offense seems fundamentally lost. I don't know that we ever said any game was an anomaly. Right now, they are who they are.
Mm-hmm.
They were actually worse against Northern Illinois on offense than they were against Texas A&M. Michael S. with another super chat. Thank you, Michael, again. Wouldn't going to the young guys lead to a season disaster like when Weiss went to Clawson in second week his freshman year? No. Not every – go ahead, Trevor.
I was about to say, first of all, the makeups of the team were completely different.
Way different.
2007, I mean, you lost – I mean, from that 2006 team, we're talking about you lose Brady Quinn, Darius Walker, Rima McKnight, Jeff Samardzija. On defense, you lose Victor Abiamiri, Derek Landry. You lose –
You also lost three starters on your offensive line.
Right. And the makeup is completely different. Like that, I mean – yeah, you go to a true freshman in Clawson in week 2, but I don't know what year Derek. Oh gosh, what was his name? Derek Anderson? No, what quarterback am I thinking of that started against Georgia?
Demetrius Jones.
Demetrius Jones.
Yeah,
I don't know what year he was, but
this is a redshirt freshman. He was only a year ahead of Jimmy.
So that's a year where I mean that's a situation that you do it, but you're not built to that year, regardless of who you started at quarterback. You didn't have a lot of other supporting roles to come in and say, well, we'll be all right if we start the young guy like you do this year. I mean, if Kenny Minchie and Riley Leonard come out or if Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr come out and start for Notre Dame in a couple weeks, that doesn't affect how good the defense still is.
Here's the other thing. If you wouldn't have gone with Jimmy in that year, it would have been even worse. Because they and it wasn't the second week, it was the second quarter or half of his first game because he took over against Georgia Tech. And let's be honest, the only reason Jimmy didn't start the beginning is because he was dealing with bone spurs in his elbow. But it was a completely different situation. Yep. Completely different. That team was an absolute train wreck. And it didn't become I feel like he's saying it became a disaster because they put Jimmy Clawson in the game. That's not at all. I mean, I'm actually going to pull up that box score because that game was over by halftime before Jimmy even came in the game.
Yeah,
and because they had Demetrius Jones and Zach Frazier, and Charlie tried to run an offense. It didn't work. They actually went to I think Demetrius Jones went 1 of 3 for 4 yards. Then they put Evan Sharpley in the game. He wasn't the answer, and then they put Jimmy in the game. But they ran for 40. They had 41 carries for -8 yards in that game. So there was a lot and they gave up 259 rushing yards to Georgia Tech. They did not lose that game because of Jimmy Clawson they didn't lose that season because of Jimmy Clawson. They had way more issues. And I would again contend that if you don't go 3-9, if Jimmy Clawson's not your starter, it would have been worse, in my opinion. That's not justifying playing CJ Carr or Kenny this year. It's like you said, a completely different situation. And Jimmy was also a year older. I mean, he was 19, I think, when he graduated high school. I mean, so it was just a different situation. Last one, God's thumb. Sunday, y'all talked about robotic. Freeman is being the same robotic, turning and asking analytic guy what to do. He's not even being free. Thoughts? I don't disagree. That was just such a weird. The optics of it were so weird. And look, I understand that all coaches have to think through the new timeout, how to use timeouts because of the 2-minute warning. The 2-minute warning adds a different element to how the clock management late in the game. And so basically what Marcus Freeman was asking the guy was, based on analytics, should I call a timeout now and then also have the 2-minute warning, or should I let it run down to 2 minutes and then save my timeouts? My concern is not that he's asking the analytics guy. He should have been freaking asking Mike Denbrock. Hey, coach, do you want me to use the timeout here and then we have more time, or do you want, would you rather save the timeout? And Marcus Freeman did confirm they did not have a timeout left. Because when you guys told me that there was a timeout left, I was like floored because I didn't think they had a timeout left. From the stadium, I didn't think they had a timeout left.
Yeah, the entire broadcast was weird. On the graphic on TV, it said that they had a timeout, and the ref, I don't know, like the sit-in referee in New York came in and said this is why they still have a timeout. It was weird.
Yeah, but he didn't think. Now they may still had a timeout, and he still doesn't realize they had a timeout. But anyway, so the point is that should be Mike Denbrock's call,
Yeah.
not some kid you just hired a couple weeks ago who's good with numbers.
Yeah.
Like it's like, okay, yeah, it's year one of the news, but that's something you should have spent all summer war rooming with your coaches about. Hey,
Totally.
we get into this situation late in the game. Those are things coaches do. It's like, how are we handling this? How are we handling that? In this situation, Mike, if we get in a situation where we need a field goal drive late in the game, would you rather, use the 2-minute warning, let the clock run all the way down and knowing we save that extra timeout? Or would you rather me use a timeout and then use the 2-minute warning? And yeah, you may start the drive with no timeouts, but you've got 35 extra seconds on the clock. Every coach is different. So the Pro Football Focus guy is not who should have been asking that question of. It should have been Mike Denbrock.
100%.
And that's my issue with it. And it's just the aesthetics of it was, it looked like, and he said, oh, he was on the sidelines against A&M too, but he wasn't following you around like a lost puppy the entire game against A&M. And I really feel like a lot of it was because I think I like Marcus Freeman a lot. I do. I respect him a lot. I don't, but I feel like he allows that type of stuff to affect him more than it should. He goes on with that. What's the guy's name? Big Cat or something like that.
Barstool Big Cat. Yeah.
Yeah. He goes on that show, which I do have a beef with that because, like, okay, here's the thought. How about you stop telling us you don't have any desire to come on our shows where you'd get a more receptive audience, but you'll go there and then get into those beefs about analytics. Whatever. Do what you got to do, man. But I feel like things like that kind of impact him a little bit. Like he hears that noise. And then you come out this week, and now the PFF guy's following him around with the analytics book, and it's just like, it's kind of weird. Go with your gut, because here's the thing. Not everyone's going to agree on this stuff. And I don't care what analytics say. Every coach is going to view it differently. You got to go with what you think is best for your football team. And this, like I was on with Mark Rogers last week, and he was asking me a scenario about this. And I said, well, I'd need to know a lot more context of this particular situation. But at the end of the day, that should be a Mike Denbrock conversation about what your offensive coordinator wants, not what the PFF guy wants.
Totally.
Or analytics guy wants. And it just was a bad look, but it just kind of further shows, like, I don't know that he's gotten any better at really understanding clock management and proper usage of the timeout situation. Like, I don't think he has a good stop on that.
I don't want to frame this like I'm trying to give Marcus Freeman advice. He's the head coach at Notre Dame, and
that's what we're here for.
He doesn't need my advice. But look, man.
Hey, he could have taken our advice last week when we told them, you guys better be prepared for all this stuff from Northern Illinois. Maybe they should have taken our advice last week.
Sure.
Maybe they should take my advice when I tell them that PFF is garbage. Just saying.
Where we've seen Marcus Freeman at his best, I don't think that there's any question that he's an authentic person. And I don't think that that's a question, but
never doubted that.
Where he's
a good person.
Absolutely.
Right.
And where he's been at his best is when he is that. Like, I understand having mentors and coaching mentors with, Jim Tressel, and you're meeting with Lou Holtz and you're asking this analytic guy what to do here and what to do here. Like, my advice to him would be stop asking, and I don't know if he is or isn't, but this is just how I'm perceiving this. Stop asking other people how to be Marcus Freeman and just go be Marcus Freeman.
Right.
There's a reason why, the authenticity that he had leading his team out of the tunnel, against Texas A&M. I never saw Jim Tressel do that. That was a Marcus Freeman thing. And then look what happened. Look how your team played for you.
Right.
So that's.
But then you let somebody else kind of dictate how your practice structure is going to go the week after.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work.
Be yourself and trust your gut, which is tough when you're at this position of, like, you have so many eyes on you. But that's where I have seen Marcus Freeman at his best, is when he is being his authentic self and leading the team how he believes it should be led, not what this guy with this experience suggests. Like, this is your coaching staff, man. Like, that's where I think, we talked about it a lot on Saturday night. The buck stops with the head coach, and we have seen that this team will follow in whatever direction that you take them.
Yep.
And that's going to be another thing that I'm looking at. I mean, to to bring up the super chat and thank you again for it is, he's not even being free. I agree with that. It's almost like sometimes he's looking for somebody to tell him what to do when I fully believe that I think he knows the answer. He just wants that affirmation that it's correct. So, that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I would never care about anything that anyone at Big Barstool Sports tells me. And I don't, it's not even a shot at Barstool Sports. I don't really watch or listen to Barstool Sports. I don't even know who that, it's Big Cat, right? I don't know who that is. I don't know why they're going on that show. I have no clue. I mean, and I'm not saying a shot, like I don't know if that's like important or not. But like that kind of stuff shouldn't matter to you. I mean, coaches shouldn't care what media people think about things. That's a conversation that is had in the office with Mike Denbrock and with Al Golden. And that's who should be making those decisions. There's always a point in time. Like, look, long before, like, people call it analytics now. I used to call it scouting reports. You know what I mean? Like, it's analytics is now the new cool term for tendencies and scouting reports. And this isn't new, but some of that stuff is when you lean too hard into it to where you're not thinking about the practical applications of it, then you're not like somebody said, 2-point conversions succeed at 50% of the time. So people say, well, if you just go for 2 every time, I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't tell me anything. Is every team in the country at 50%? Well, are you 75% when you do it in the first or second quarter, but you're 25% when you do it in the fourth quarter, game on the line? There's so many other things that factor into it besides just, hey, 50% of the time it does this. It's like, well, okay, but what about this? What kind of defense do you have? What kind of offense do you have? Is your offensive line this? Is your quarterback that? And in that situation, you need to be talking to your offensive coordinator about, hey, man, what do you want here? And then go from there. I personally would have called the timeout earlier, then use the 2-minute clock, because I'm a believer that I would rather have more time and no timeouts than a lot less time and a timeout.
Especially in college.
Right.
Clock stops on first downs.
Right.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was just a bad look. He looked like a coach that wasn't confident in making that decision, and that's an even bigger problem for me.
Totally.
And some guy that's been with you for 5 minutes shouldn't be making that decision. You should have thought about that. That should be determined before the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. So anyway, Trevor, that's gonna do it, man. So I agree, Ryan. I completely agree. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being with us. 5:00 tonight, we'll have IB Nation Sports Talk. Trevor will be back with me on Thursday, along with Ryan Roberts. We'll do our prediction show and Keys to Victory show. I'll be here tomorrow for a Notre Dame rundown tomorrow at 1:00. We'll also go live at 1:00. We'll have a mailbag on Friday at 1:00. And, of course, tonight, tomorrow, Thursday night, 5:00, IB Nation Sports Talk. So definitely check all those out. But that's why you need to be subscribed to Irish Breakdown. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review if you are listening via our podcast platform. And, of course, as always, if you've not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Don't be one of those people that's bailing on us because you're mad at Notre Dame. Stick with us, all right, because we're going to keep giving some great content and having some fun with it. And if you've thought about signing up and haven't done it yet, now's the perfect time to do so. So thanks for being with us, everybody. Trevor, great job today. And we will talk to you guys again here very soon. Matter of fact, 1:00 tomorrow on the Irish Breakdown podcast.